In the 1st century BC, the Roman Republic stood as the most powerful state in the Mediterranean. From the sun-baked hills of Hispania to the deserts of North Africa, its legions marched in disciplined formation, spreading Roman law, engineering, and ambition across the known world. Yet beneath the marble temples and grand forums, a storm was brewing, one that would sweep away the Republic itself. The Senate, once the proud guardian of Roman liberty, had become a battleground of greed and factionalism. Wealth from conquered territories poured into the hands of a few elite families, leaving the common citizens struggling. Political debates grew more bitter, alliances more fragile. It was in this climate of corruption and instability that a new breed of leaders emerged, men whose ambitions stretched far beyond the Senate's walls. Among them stood Gaius Julius Caesar, brilliant general, shrewd politician, and a man who understood that power was not given, but taken. Our story begins here in the heart of the Roman Empire. Behind me is the Colosseum, a symbol of Rome's unmatched power and glory. But in the 1st century BC, when Caesar lived, this area was a swamp. Yet even in the muck, Caesar saw opportunity. He purchased the land and began construction, a project that would become one of ancient Rome's most iconic landmarks. That's the thing about Caesar. He wasn't born to power. His father was a member of the Roman Senate, which meant that he wasn't poor. But Caesar wasn't born into the ruling class either. And if you weren't a senator or a patrician, life in Republican Rome was tough. You were expected to work long hours as a small farmer or artisan, and you could easily be exploited. For example, Rome's great wealth came from its provincial holdings. Every year, grain from the fertile fields of Egypt flowed into Rome, but who controlled that grain? The senators did. They could set the price so that it benefited them and hurt the poor. So Caesar understood that to win the support of the Roman people, he needed to address their day-to-day concerns. But first, he needed to get their attention, and there was no better way to do that than with military success. So in 58 BC, the Roman Senate sent him to subdue the Gauls, a collection of tribes in northern Italy, today's France and Germany. Caesar crossed the Rhine River and defeated 3 Gallic kings at the Battle of the San. It was a decisive victory, but it made him enemies. One such enemy was Gaius Cassius Longinus. Cassius was a senator who hated Caesar's growing popularity. He believed that only members of the aristocracy should hold power, and Caesar was a threat to that system. Eventually, Caesar would cross the Rubicon and march on Rome, starting a civil war that would change Rome forever. But in 53 BC, Caesar was still in Gaul, and to secure his power there, he needed to form an alliance with another rising star, Marcus Licinius, Crassus. Now Crassus was rich, powerful, and according to Plutarch, stingy. At the gladiator games, while most senators hosted lavish feasts and entertained guests, Crassus brought a folding chair and a lunch basket. He was willing to spend money to gain power, and that made him a dangerous ally. Together, Caesar and Crassus formed a political alliance with another senator, Pompey the Great. This alliance, known as the First Triumvirate, dominated Roman politics for years. It gave Caesar the resources to conquer Gaul, Pompey control of the seas, and Crassus, well, he got to be in charge of building roads in Spain. But the partnership fell apart after Crassus was killed in battle against the Parthians. You see, one of the big problems in Republican Rome was that there were just too many rivals for power. There were the patricians, who controlled most of the wealth. Then there were the populares, orators, who advocated for the rights of the common people. And then there were the optimates, or best men, senators who claimed to be nonpartisan but really just wanted to maintain the status quo. Because of these constant power struggles, Rome's political system was unstable. Any ambitious politician who wanted to succeed needed allies, like a lot of allies. And that's what the triumvirate was, an alliance of powerful men who shared political goals. But alliances aren't easy to keep. And after Crassus died, Caesar and Pompey went their separate ways. Caesar returned to Rome in 49 BC, having just finished conquering Gaul, which he renamed Gallia, Caesar's conquest. As a reward, he planned to distribute land to his veterans and create a new elite class of loyal citizens. But the Senate didn't like the idea of an independent Caesar. They ordered him to disband his army, believing that without power, Caesar would return to being just another politician, but Caesar refused. The following year, he led his troops across the Rubicon River and into Italy. That action began the Roman Civil War. It also created one of history's greatest quotes. According to Plutarch, as Caesar crossed the river, he sent a letter to the Senate saying, "The die is cast." In Latin, alia iacta est, which means that the die has been cast, the decision made, and there was no turning back. Within 3 years, Caesar had defeated all of Pompey's supporters and become the undisputed master of Rome. But his triumph was short-lived. You see, Caesar's rise to power was too fast, too dramatic, and it made the Senate nervous. It turns out that Caesar was right. Power doesn't make friends. And in 44 BC, members of the Senate assassinated him on the Ides of March. To this day, we don't know who was behind the plot. But we do know that Caesar's close friend, Gaius Cassius Longinus, was one of the conspirators. That fact alone shows us how quickly allegiances could turn in Rome. But assassination wouldn't stop Caesar. You see, before he died, Caesar adopted his heir, a young man named Gaius Octavius, who would later take the name Augustus. And after Caesar's death, Augustus joined forces with Caesar's other general, Mark Antony, to hunt down the assassins. Together, they defeated Caesar's murderers at the Battle of Philippi in Greece. But this alliance was never strong. Antony was brash, impulsive, and self-destructive. Octavian, meanwhile, was smart, calculating, and ambitious. After defeating the assassins, the two men split up the Roman provinces between them, setting up a second triumvirate. But soon afterwards, Octavian turned on his former ally. According to Plutarch, the exact terms of the agreement were unclear. Some historians believe that Antony promised to marry Octavian to his sister Octavia. But after defeating Mark Antony's rival, Sextus Pompey, Octavian reclaimed some western provinces and then used that as leverage against his former ally. He demanded that Antony give up Cleopatra, the queen of Egypt, who was also Antony's lover. But Antony refused, and the stage was set for war. The conflict became personal very quickly. Antony insulted Octavian by divorcing his sister and marrying Cleopatra. But Octavian got the last laugh. His navy defeated Antony's and Cleopatra's fleets at the Battle of Actium in 32 BC. The following year, Antony and Cleopatra both took their own lives, and Octavian seized control of Egypt. He then paraded Cleopatra's former lovers, including Antony, through the streets of Rome in triumph. At this point, Octavian was the undisputed master of the Roman world. But to the Roman people, he was just another tyrant. See, from their perspective, he was just another Caesar. So in 27 BC, Octavian gave the Senate a gift, a constitution. It didn't abolish slavery or grant voting rights to women, but it did establish a number of important precedents. For example, it guaranteed the rights of Roman citizens throughout the empire and established a series of local governors to administer justice. Most importantly, though, it created a system for transferring power from one ruler to another. The Senate bestowed upon Octavian the title Augustus, meaning venerable. And with that title came unprecedented powers. Augustus was granted the authority to appoint magistrates, control the treasury, and raise and maintain an army. But in exchange for all that power, Augustus kept the Senate intact. Now, don't get me wrong, the Senate still had its power, but it was limited power. Most of the important decisions were made by Augustus and his appointed officials. The reality was that Republican Rome was dead. Augustus understood that. He was the first emperor of Rome, but he also understood that the Romans didn't like that fact. So he presented his empire as a continuation of the Republic. That's why he kept the Senate around, and why he allowed Rome's institutions and customs to continue. Under Augustus, Rome entered the Pax Romana, or Roman peace, 2 centuries of relative peace and prosperity. But that peace was enforced with an iron fist. Augustus appointed loyal generals to govern the provinces. He maintained a professional army of 25,000 men, and established a secret police force known as the Vigils to watch over Rome. He also made sure that his image was seen everywhere, on coins, statues, paintings, temples, even a giant obelisk in the center of Rome's main square. Augustus used propaganda to make sure that everyone knew who was in charge. Under the emperors who followed Augustus, Rome would grow to its greatest extent, push farther into Asia, and conquer new lands. But Rome's troubles were already on the horizon. While Augustus ushered in an age of prosperity, his successors would face challenges that threatened to tear the empire apart. Stay tuned to find out how Rome went from pax to pandemonium in our next episode. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more information about ancient Rome.